Hello everyone, my guest today is the co-founder and scientific director of the NGO HUTAN, created in 1998 and based in the village of Sukao beside the Kinabatangan River. The primary focus was then to help orangutan populations to strive in overlogged forests. Today, a team of around 80 full-time staff is working on protecting not only these great apes, but elephants, helmeted hornbills, and swiftlets as well. Welcome, Dr. Marc Ancrenaz.
Hi, welcome everybody.
Thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Enjoying Sukao, actually. I just arrived yesterday in the field.
Nice. With a background as a vet, you have an extensive experience in wildlife research that you built up all around the world, I saw, before landing in Sabah in 1994. 4 years later, HUTAN was born in the hopes of helping the orangutans who were threatened by logging, and you've since expanded a lot. So what originally drew you into exotic animals and wildlife? Was it like an interest back then, or did you start studying farm animals and domestic pets in France and then decided to switch to the wild side of fauna?
When I was a kid, my only interest has always and only be wildlife. Any type of wildlife. I did, as you said, a veterinary study because I wanted to work with wildlife. And at this time, it was quite complicated to find a way to fulfill my dream. So I became a veterinarian, and as soon as I got my degree, I started to work in different places, always with wild animals. So at the beginning, I used to work more as a vet, taking care of the wild animals. I mean, they were sick or translocating them, these kind of things. And in Sabah, when we started this project, my interest shifted more toward community-based conservation. So I am not acting as a veterinarian anymore these days, but I'm doing wildlife conservation overall.
So you were a veterinarian, and HUTAN's co-founder, Dr. Isabel Lackman, is a primatologist, meaning both of you have a strong scientific background. So did you immediately understand or decide the need of a more holistic approach, as stated on your website, for better results in conservation?
For a long time, the way we have perceived conservation was to create protected areas, which is necessary, of course, and then to set aside these places and let all the other places being used by people. But for us, something was missing. For us, we were really interested to look at how we could find ways for people and wildlife to coexist. I remember the first time I came to Sukao village, one of my first sightings in this village was an orangutan nest in a durian tree that was in the middle of the village. So we thought, well, it's a nice place. It seems that people and animals somehow try to live together. So we started the project as a research program. At this time, as you said earlier, we wanted to understand if and how orangutan could survive in disturbed forest. Yeah. We realized that conservation really lies with the people who are sharing the same land than these animals. So we added new components to our project based on what the people from the village would tell us. For example, a big issue was conflict between villagers and elephants. And as long as we are not able to address this type of issues, it was super difficult for us to engage with the villagers and to tell them that orangutan needed conservation. And we needed to find ways to mitigate conflicts or to find ways for peaceful coexistence.
But amongst other projects of multiple topics, one of HUTAN's main focuses is and has been since the start orangutans. Why is this? Was it like a personal love for them or something you witnessed or learned about that triggered this focus for the NGO?
Well, few reasons. Facing an orangutan in the wild is really something special. They deserve the right to live, for sure. They are super intelligent and super interesting to follow and to study. Having said that, they are also very complicated species to understand, because even if they are so close to us, their way of living is completely alien to us.
Yeah.
So they are super appealing, but at the same time, difficult to understand. The other reason is because, of course, they are an iconic species. My interest personally is the forest, is all the ecosystem. But if I start to talk to people about ants, for example, I'm not sure many people will follow me and will be interested in what I have to say. But speaking about orangutan, protecting orangutan means protecting their habitat, the forest. And de facto, this is protecting other species. So we were also using this iconic value of the orangutan for our project. The last reason is because it's true. Isabelle in particular had a very strong link with orangutan. She really wanted to start a project on orangutan. I never really knew what was an orangutan before coming to Borneo. I was working before with chimpanzees and gorillas. I was not so interested in orangutan, to be honest, but in '94, when we realized that in Kinabatangan we didn't have only orangutan, but elephants as well, I was convinced because I love elephants. So that's why also in HUTAN, we are working with many different species.
You have a total of 5 teams that do different researches, along with supporting staff, of course. The first is the orangutan research team. How many people are in this unit?
As of today, it's about 12 people, 12 researchers. So all the staff in HUTAN are from the village. So they are villagers with no background in science or biology, but they have been trained to do the research. So as of today, for example, they go to the forest every day, they follow the animals, they take data. But more than that, they are the ones to exploit the data, to analyze the data, and to produce all the results. So they are really acting as researchers. So 12 people from the orangutan team. As I said, we have a study site. It's 8 kilometers square in the lower Kinabatangan Wildlife Sanctuary. Every day they go to the forest, we look for orangutan. Over the years, we have been able to identify several of these animals. We know them, they know us. And so the work is just to follow them in the forest and try to understand what they do and take notes about what they eat, where they go, and this kind of behavior.
The next unit is the Wildlife and Survey Protection Unit. So what equipment does this unit require to survey the forest?
So yeah, it's a unit that does a lot of different things. We started off with this unit by doing elephant conflict mitigation, and very soon we realized that if we really want to mitigate conflicts, we need also to understand why there are conflicts. And so we need to understand the ecology of these animals. So the team at the beginning really worked a lot with elephants, and they are still doing so, but we have expanded the number of taxa of animals that we are studying. And the goal of this wildlife survey and protection is to patrol the area. And we also wanted to better understand if other species than the elephant or the orangutan were able to survive in this fragmented and degraded forest of Kinabatangan. So for example, we started to do river survey to look at proboscis monkeys. So in this case, we use a boat, and every month we will survey the river and try to count how many groups we see. And over the years, you can see the population trend. There are more proboscis or less proboscis, where they are, and so forth. And over the years, we have also added more taxa, more species. So they work with birds. We want to know what species of birds are found in the forest and what species are doing well, what species are not doing so well. We do a lot of frog monitoring. They work also with small mammals, all types of animals, if you want, because the idea is to really understand the health of the ecosystem and to see how the species can adjust, can survive in disturbed forest, in fragmented habitat.
But what do you do with the data that you collect from all these researches?
Well, every year we are presenting the data in reports, and we try to understand the population trends, as I mentioned. Sometimes we use this data, especially data from orangutan and elephants, to publish scientific articles. We are not an academic organization, but I think it's really important to publish the results to show the rest of the world what's going on in Kinabatangan and how species like elephants, like orangutan, hornbill, and others can survive and what they need to survive in this disturbed habitats. We produce reports. Sometimes, of course, we do newspaper articles and these kind of things. We are also using a lot of this information for our education and awareness program. I'm pretty sure that we're going to speak about this later. So basically, all this information is really used to better understand the ecology of the area and then to manage the place.
You also have a forest reforestation team. So how many trees were you able to plant so far, and how many corridors do you hope to create?
So in average, the team is planting between 20 and 30,000 trees every year. The problem with reforestation in a place like Kinabatangan is not planting trees. This is very easy. I mean, it takes a lot of effort, but it's not so complicated. It doesn't take much time. The problem is that you need to maintain the seedling, because if there is no maintenance, all of the seedlings that are planted are going to die. They're going to die because of predation by animals, but also, and more importantly, by weeds and plants that can entangle and strangle the seedlings and kill it. So for one tree that is planted, we need to come back, the team needs to come back every month for 3 years to remove all these weeds, because if not, the tree will die. What we try to do is to make sure that at least 80% of the seedlings we plant are going to survive. We have about 18 staff right now doing the reforestation, split in 2 teams. Only one man is working there. All the rest of the team are women. And it's very interesting because at the beginning, 20 years ago or so, when we started the reforestation, it didn't work. It didn't work because all of our team members at this time were men, and men are useless for reforestation, at least in our setting. And we realized that by hiring women, we had much better results. And women, they do care for the seedling. So every single seedling they plant, they are really nurturing them much more than men were able to do it. That's why now 90% of our reforestation team is women. So, and it's working super well. It's a very difficult job to do, but it's very rewarding, you know, when you see the forest growing back little by little, and more importantly, then when you see wildlife coming back into these places that we are restoring.
But additionally to this, you have also the Pangi Swiftlet Recovery Team. I had never heard of this species of bird before. So could you tell me and anyone who doesn't know what this species of bird is, what threatens them today and how your team is able to help them?
There are 2 species of swiftlet. You know, the swiftlet are small birds that are producing what we call edible nests. They use caves to breed, and they build a nest with their saliva. There was a trade of this edible nest to do the edible nest soup. Very important for the Chinese communities. So what we realized maybe 12 years ago is that there were a lot of people who would come into these caves and harvest illegally the nest, because the value of the nest is very high. It's maybe 4,000 to 5,000 ringgit, so 1,000 US or more a kilo. So problem is that when people are harvesting the nest all the time, they destroy the clutch, they destroy the eggs, so it's not sustainable. So we realized that the colonies of swiftlets that were living in one of the limestone here in Sukao were declining super fast. When we started to protect the caves 12 years ago, there were only 300 pair of birds breeding. So what the teams are doing is to protect the cave 24 hours a day. We don't want anyone to come and disturb or steal the nest. Today, more than 5,000 pair of birds are breeding there. We are not exploiting this nest for commercial and for trade. We are just protecting the caves in order for the birds to build up their numbers. And recently, we realized that some of these birds when they become adults, they look for a breeding place and they don't stay in the cave only. They go to the farms that people are building in their backyard in Sukao. There is a lot of artificial farms for swiftlet in Sukao. And actually the birds we are protecting in the forest, their offspring, their babies, they come to these farms, and this is creating an incentive, a financial incentive for local people. If people see a value in the conservation of the swiftlet, if they protect the swiftlet, de facto, they're gonna also protect the forest. By protecting the forest, because of the swiftlet, we also protect the habitat of the orangutan. So it's an indirect way in this case to use a species, which is a swiftlet, to protect the orangutan. Usually it's the opposite, as I said earlier. We use the orangutan to protect the other species. But with Pangi, we have found a way where swiftlet can indirectly benefit all of the other species living in this forest.
Finally, you also have an environmental awareness program team, and that does a lot of education, especially for the local community, as you mentioned. So how do you find they most commonly respond to the awareness that their local environment is in danger?
Kids in particular are super interested in all of these questions about environment, about wildlife. And the reason why we set up this unit years ago was when we realized that people are flocking from all over the world to see elephants, to see to see orangutan, to see proboscis monkeys in Kinabatangan. But actually, the local people that didn't necessarily knew that orangutan is so special. Because some of them were used to see orangutan, they didn't realize that it's only in Borneo or Sumatra that you found them. We also realized that many kids, especially, they never really saw this wildlife. So there was a complete disconnect between the local communities and all the wonders that are surrounding them. So we decided to create this unit. Here again, there are all people from the village with no educational background. So they had to go through a lot of training. So it's something we do a lot with our financial partners. This team of educators have been able to really learn how to disseminate information and also how to use all the data collected by our field team to reach out the communities and also people in the cities.
I do want to circle back to orangutans. I was particularly interested in your bridge project from all the way back in 2003. I had heard of corridors and I knew that orangutans weren't swimmers, but I had never heard of suspended ropes connecting two sides of a small riverbank like a bridge for apes. It's a very good idea, I have to say. Do you remember why it originated and how it was executed?
In the past, these animals would use trees that are overhanging the small tributaries to cross. But all of these large trees have been removed because of past deforestation. So we realized when we started this work in 98 that in many places, the orangutan couldn't cross the tributaries, the small river. And this is a problem because this means that there is no gene flow between the different groups of animals anymore. And this is not viable. In the long term, this will create issues, genetic issues, and issues with genetic fitness. One day we were visiting a national zoo in Washington, D.C. in the USA. And at this time, they had built ropes all over the space there for orangutan to move from one enclosure to the next, to the next, to the next. And we thought, if they do that in captivity, maybe they will do that in the wild. So we started to build our bridges. It took us 3 years before we got the first evidence of an orangutan using the bridge. A lot of species were using the bridges, not the orangutan. So we were really wondering why. And I do think it's because orangutan, as I said, they don't swim, they are super afraid of the water. And they are smart. So a lot of time we would see orangutans sitting by the bridge, looking and not taking the risk to go. But after a few months, after a few years, when they realized that other species were always going back and forth, well, at some point, they would start to do it. So they are not using the bridges every day, not at all. It's once in a while, but this once in a while is sufficient to allow for the gene flow to take place. So meaning that there is a mix between males and female, both sides of the river.
In the early 2000s, HUTAN was able to design a new method of surveying orangutans using helicopters. Could you explain how this works and why it's more effective than, say, like drones?
Okay, so surveying great apes, so including African great apes and orangutan, is super difficult because it's very difficult to find the animals in the forest. So usually what we do, we don't count the animals, we count their nest, because every night an orangutan, chimps, or gorillas, they will build a nest to sleep. And the conventional way of doing surveys is to go to the forest and you count the nest. Problem is that it takes a long time to do that, and you cover only small areas in the forest because it's difficult work. In the early 2000s, the government was asking us to design a way to survey orangutan, not only in Kinabatangan, but across the entire state. And we heard that people used in the past have tried to use helicopter because you can see nest from an helicopter when you go slow and low above the forest canopy. And so we decided to give it a try. And so we designed a new way to count nest and to estimate orangutan density from the helicopter. The beauty of helicopter is that you can cover a very large area in no time. You fly for 3 or 4 hours and you cover a place big like Kinabatangan. If I want to do the same from the ground, it will take us 6 months. Of course, the problem is the cost. It's more expensive than going to the forest and going by foot. We are also using drones. Problem with drones is that so far, drones are not made. We can see also nests from drone images. So that's why we are using them as well. But if you want to cover a small area, like a forest patch in a plantation, a drone is perfect. You send your drone, you have your image, and you look at orangutan nest. If you want to cover a large forest, it will be very difficult because of the autonomy of the drone. So depending on the size of the area you want to survey, you need the drone or you need an helicopter. What we are trying to do is to develop an artificial intelligence that will detect the nest for us. And this is a work in progress. It's not done yet, but I'm sure that in a couple of years, this will be available. So this will make this type of work much, much easier.
Overall, what is the legacy you are working to leave behind?
What I hope for the future is that we are going to be able to reverse the trend of biodiversity erosion, and we are going to be able to bring back all this population. And I really would like for the younger generation, for example, to be able to come to Sukao, to come to Kinabatangan, and to be in how same way I was the first time I came here, now nearly 30 years ago. As I said earlier, first time I came in Kinabatangan, we were like, oh my gosh, it's an amazing place. And yeah, my fight is to try to not lose this.
Finally, we know that one of the biggest problems in the world today, all over the world, is climate change. So how do you think conservation, like all the work that you do, can help to combat climate change?
A simple example that everybody knows, but it's good to remind, is by planting trees, you help fighting climate change. It's a global challenge, it's a global issue, and this is going to affect everybody in the world.
Yeah.
The good news, though, is that everybody can be part of the solution. It's really a matter of choice. Everybody at his own level can act to improve the situation. So what I want to believe is that if everybody plays his part, things can improve. But this is a good news. It's not something that we cannot do nothing about. Everybody can make a difference.
That's it, actually. Thank you so much for joining me, Marc. It was such a pleasure to learn all about what HUTAN is doing and the many, many projects that they're constantly working on at improving. I wish nothing but the best to this NGO for the future and hope that you and your team stay safe, of course. Thanks again and have a great evening.
Thanks a lot, and we are waiting for you in Sukao.
Yes, I definitely have to come. Thank you for watching today's interview. For those who live in Kota Kinabalu and who would like to know more, make sure to go to the Asia Parks Congress held at the new convention center up until the 29th May, where some of HUTAN's representatives will be, and make sure to show them some support on social media. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Bye.
Ako talaga po.